Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be another fun breakdown where we take a look at the most impactful and influential films of the 1990s. Now we have to be clear straight away that these movies within the list are not the best movies of the 1990s. These are the films that had the most influence in terms of the movie industry and pop culture in general. Influential of the trends that they set within Hollywood, the standard that they set in terms of concept, genre, effects and tone, how many films were made following the impact of these movies that were released. Now yes, many of these films will tend to be amongst the most successful at the box office, which makes sense, but others may not necessarily be the highest grossing, but still left the most lasting impression. Now when we look back at the decade, these are the films that are remembered the most, and even more so still carry some relevance and reverence within culture today. So check out my breakdown here and let me know what you think in the comments below. If you disagree with any of my choices, let me know and we can have further debate and discussion afterwards. If you enjoy this breakdown and like to see me more of this type, then give me further suggestions and we can see about compiling more lists like this within the future. So here we go then with the top 10 most impactful and influential films I believe were of the 1990s. So the first entry we have at number 10, and that is The Matrix. Now despite coming out in the last year of the decade, I still included the movie as it essentially came to redefine action movie making for the next upcoming decade. The story here of Keanu Reeves, Mr. Anderson or Neo, living in a simulated reality created by sentient machines involved in a futuristic war against the humans really captured the imagination of audiences with the concept of whether the world we live in is actually real or not. Along with the effects and martial arts choreography, which was a huge fusion of science fiction and Hong Kong cinema, which culminated of course in a bullet time sequence where we saw Neo dodging bullets at an impossible angles in that 360 shot, without question one of the most iconic shots of the decade, very much shaping the next decade in how action and effects and indeed physics were actually visualised on the big screen. Now I think we can have very little doubt that if The Matrix had been released in the beginning of this decade, that it still would have been every bit as impactful. So a very fine choice. Despite the fact coming at the end of the decade, I still regard The Matrix as one of the most influential and impactful movies of the 1990s, and that's why I've included it here at number 10. We then go on to number 9 on this list, and that is Blade. Another entry towards the end of the decade, but Blade still remains important in terms of the first stages of very much the rebuilding of the comic book movie genre, which had been damaged by the true disaster of Batman and Robin, which was released a year earlier. Blade helped convince studios that comic book characters could work by taking them seriously again, and it's one of the few examples that actually improves on the original source material by including far more modern sensibilities and elements of science fiction and martial arts alongside a grounded realism. We would see this approach continue with the X-Men movie in 2000, in giving that all-black sleek aesthetic which audiences would find far more appropriate at the time in terms of adapting comic book stories and characters. Of course, this mindset changed later on when we saw the emergence of the MCU with Iron Man in 2008. Wesley Snipes has been one of the best ever comic book movie castings ever, accompanied with an electric imagination and intensity. Blade actually incorporated a lot of the action sequences that we saw in a year prior to The Matrix, which is another one of the many reasons why Blade earns its place on this list at number 9 in terms of the most influential and impactful movies of the 90s decade. We then go on to number 8 on this list, and that is Titanic. James Cameron's gigantic near 3-hour love story of the historic crashing of the Titanic gains its place by not only being the highest grossing movie of the decade, but also at the time the highest grossing movie within all of movies, with a huge $1.8 billion gross. Whilst it wasn't anywhere near the best movie of the 90s, it still remains massively significant for its achievement commercially, alongside a huge 11 Academy Award wins, tying the record with Ben-Hur from 1959. It was also the first movie in history to gross over $1 billion at the global box office, very much setting a new bar as to how big and commercially successful movies could be. And of course it confirmed James Cameron's status as one of the industry's biggest filmmakers, ironically with the weakest movie of his career in my opinion, if you follow the likes of the Terminator films, Aliens, True Lies and The Abyss. But regardless of whether you like the film or not, there's no denying that Titanic, as the biggest movie commercially of the 1990s, was also one of the most influential and impactful of that particular decade. We then go on to number 7 on this list, and that is Scream. Wes Craven's horror slasher film was important for very much reviving the teen horror slasher genre that had been so prominent throughout the 70s and 80s when we look at the likes of Halloween, Fright Night and Nightmare on Elm Street. Now Scream very much tapped into those sensibilities by creating the iconic look of the serial killer with the black robe and the ghost mask, hunting down various victims. And after a big box office success, Scream very much instilled far more confidence from studios in entries of the genre. Subsequently, after this movie, we saw several sequels of the movie itself, which very much had diminishing returns, for which for me, the first movie still remains easily the best. Definitely, this is a movie that, without question, earns its place in influencing and very much rejuvenating the teen horror movie genre, and that is Scream at number 7. We then go on to number 6 on this list, and that is Saving Private Ryan. Steven Spielberg's epic World War II drama from 1998 focused on the invasion of Normandy, revolving around a platoon of soldiers searching for the missing soldier James Francis Ryan, played by Matt Damon. The movie earns its place on this list for the revolutionisation of the staging of combat scenes within war movies itself. The opening sequence of the Omaha beach landing still remains one of the most vivid and intense scenes that we've ever seen within a war movie, presenting very much of that visual, real-life, real-time sequence of events, a very sharp, uncompromising depiction of violence and very bleak and unsympathetic, where we see random bursts of bullets and killings and explosions, creating such a terrifying sense of dread along with the shaky cam techniques. It really did open the eyes in terms of how war could be depicted on screen. Now, whilst I do feel that there are quite a few superior war movies as opposed to Saving Private Ryan, you can't deny the impact of this movie, which continued Steven Spielberg's change in trajectory in terms of the projects that he was choosing. We also saw the legacy of the film that it left with the HBO series Band of Brothers and the Pacific, both equally powerful and compelling, very much sharing the same identity as Saving Private Ryan, which overall was the second highest grossing movie of 1998 behind Armageddon, and definitely one of the most impressionable movies of the 1990s. We then go on to number 5 on this list, and that is Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese's seminal classic gangster movie showing the rise of Henry Hill within the crime organisation. Now, whereas The Godfather was far more grandiose, Goodfellas was much more pacier and flashier with its editing and direction, very much painting gangsters as almost celebrities and rock stars, fueled by great performances from Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and a sadly recently passed Ray Liotta, who's absolutely great as Henry Hill in the lead role, and of course the iconic scene, the funny guy moment that he has with Tommy, still remains one of the most iconic and referenced scenes within all of gangster movies. Now, whilst I'll still maintain that Martin Scorsese's Casino is a superior movie, there's no doubt in the impact of this film here. Its most significant legacy, of course, was being the inspiration for the HBO epic series The Sopranos, itself deemed as one of the greatest television shows of all time. So, a superb entry on this list within Goodfellas as one of the most influential films of the 1990s. We then go on to number 4 on this list, and that is Terminator 2 Judgement Day, James Cameron's epic science fiction sequel to his classic future war masterpiece, The Terminator in 1984. Now, this sequel was truly the first cultural blockbuster phenomenon of the decade, as we see Arnold Schwarzenegger's iconic villain from the first film sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor's son John, as he proves to be the future hope of humanity in the war against the machines. Now, of course, one of the biggest impacts that Terminator 2 made within a decade was with the creation of the movie's villain, the T-1000, which had the great distinction of being the first truly fully realised CGI character, blowing everybody's minds with the morphing into his liquid metal form. It's a truly stunning effect that amazingly still holds up today, and I can vividly remember at the time when watching this movie for the first time being truly perplexed at seeing something like this on the big screen. Now, the movie also cemented Arnold Schwarzenegger as the top action movie star of the industry, this movie adding to his already established cultural status, with the various lines such as "Hasta la vista, baby," alongside "I'll be back." And when we look at Linda Hamilton's Sarah Connor and her development within this sequel, we had one of cinema's most iconic action female characters, probably since the emergence of Sigourney Weaver's Ripley in Aliens. So this movie just connected so much with audiences on so many levels. It's been viewed as one of the greatest movie sequels of all time, though I still maintain that the first film is still the superior movie, but without question, Terminator 2 Judgement Day is easily one of the most impactful movies of the 1990s. We then go on to number 3 on this list, and that is Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino's crime drama from 1994, focused on a multitude of gangsters and bank robbers and criminals in what's really more of a collection of short stories rather than a focused narrative. This movie really transcended with audiences from its many quotable lines and scenes. This was a film that really interpreted what a criminal drama and gangster movie could be. Yes, we still had the violence and the abrasive characters, but there was much more of a quirkiness, almost a self-referential tone about this overall film. And to an extent, Quentin Tarantino had already done this previously with Reservoir Dogs, which is for me the superior film, but Pulp Fiction succeeded in very much defying the typical conventions and expectations of an independent movie. Here, Tarantino had assembled a huge staple of established prolific actors, all at a very low cost. The movie itself cost around 11 million and went on to achieve truly mainstream success, with grossing 242 million worldwide at the box office. And it was at this time that Tarantino was being touted as the next dominant important director of the decade. The movie itself was also a huge invigoration for certain actors' career. We very much saw the reigniting of the comeback of John Travolta and Bruce Willis, who went on both to become amongst the biggest movie stars of the 1990s. The film of course thrust Samuel L. Jackson into the mainstream, where he would go on to become one of the most prolific and revered actors within the industry over the next 20 to 25 years. So whilst it's not Tarantino's best movie, in my opinion, you can't deny the true influence and impact that the film had at the time of its overall release. So without question, one of the most impactful movies of the 1990s, and that is Pulp Fiction at number 3. So we then come on to the runner-up on this list at number 2 in terms of the most influential films of the 1990s, and that is Toy Story. Pixar Studios' feature animated movie completely changed the landscape of the genre and entertainment itself by producing the first entirely CGI animated movie, really opened up the eyes of what could be done and achieved within the format. Of course, the story of a young boy called Andy owning a bunch of toys who came to life during the absence of humans really connected with both kids and adults. Characters such as Woody and Buzz Lightyear really became cultural icons within the industry at the time of this movie's release. And the movie's success obviously saw a huge shift towards more CGI animation, and at the same time saw the beginning of the end of the true dominance of the 2D animation era, where previous Disney movies such as Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin and The Lion King were amongst the highest grossing films of the decade. Following the huge success of the first film, Pixar Studios under the Disney banner would begin a truly unprecedented run of hugely successful animated films in CGI for the next decade, which included all of the multiple Toy Story sequels, as well as the likes of The Incredibles, Finding Nemo, Wall-E and Up. It was such a successful run by a studio that hadn't been equalled or surpassed until the emergence of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, overall including 25 movies that grossed a total of $14 billion at the box office, all of which was spawned by the first film's success, without question one of the most influential movies of the 90s, and that is Toy Story at number 2. And so we come to it at last then, the number 1 position, the most impactful and influential movie of the 1990s, and that is Jurassic Park. Master director Steven Spielberg reaffirmed his status as cinema's greatest entertainer by tapping into the imagination of a whole culture and audience by showing us what dinosaurs could look like if they were fully living and breathing and walking and indeed running around among us. The story itself of a theme park of dinosaurs was very much an apt concept, as going to see the film very much felt like you were indeed going to a theme park. Providing all of those spectacular thrills of a roller coaster, this was a film that was truly an immersive experience and very much a reminder of how much more powerful cinema can be when you compare it to overall streaming that we've seen currently today. Now of course the visualisation of the dinosaurs is the film's true legacy. If Terminator 2 had opened the doors of what CGI could do, then Jurassic Park truly blew them all off. Having the dinosaurs moving so fluidly and as realistically is really a feast for the eyes, and the effects of the film still hold up today. Now of course Spielberg was smart enough to mix the CGI with more practical animatronics for the close-up shots of the dinosaurs to really add that level of realism, which of course added to the constant danger and tension that was set throughout the movie. Now for all of the numerous sequels that we've seen throughout the last 2 decades, which has recently included the Jurassic World Dominion, it can't be denied that Jurassic Park, the first film, still holds up today as one of the most spectacular and truly thrilling entertaining blockbusters, not only of the 1990s but indeed within popular culture itself. It opened up endless possibilities of recreating certain monsters and beasts on a big screen, over the next 20 to 30 years we would see very much the likes of Godzilla and King Kong all being visualised on a big screen to convincing effect. So alongside the effects, as well as all of the spectacle and danger and very much peril and jeopardy set throughout the film, make no mistake, Jurassic Park truly stands out by some clear distance as definitely the most impactful and influential movie of the 1990s. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings and review of what I deem were the most impactful films of the 1990s. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As I mentioned at the start of this video, if there are any other movies that you feel should be included on this list, then let me know in the comments and we can have further discussion. And again, if you have any further suggestions of breakdowns that you'd like to see me do within this channel, then drop me a suggestion within the comments as well. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.